He runs through the airport like a man on fire. Seo Ji-tae, the most feared crime boss in South Korea, the man who makes politicians sweat and senators disappear, is sprinting through Seoul International in a $40,000 suit, knocking shoulders with strangers, breathing hard, eyes wild with something nobody who works for him has ever seen on his face before. Desperation. Because 48 hours ago, in front of cameras and reporters and the entire country, he smiled and said he had no wife. And the woman watching from the next room finally believed him. Like this video. Comment your city. Let's see how far this story travels. The morning it all started to fall apart began the way most mornings in their apartment did, with silence wearing the costume of peace. Nia Okafor stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the 43rd floor penthouse in Gangnam, holding a ceramic mug with both hands the way she always did when she was cold inside and didn't want anyone to know it. Outside, Seoul spread itself in every direction. Gray towers and neon signage and the Han River cutting through it all like a scar that never healed right. It was 6:42 in the morning. The city was waking up. She had barely slept. Behind her, she could hear Ji-tae in the kitchen. The sound of the espresso machine. The precise, controlled movements of a man who approached even coffee making the way he approached everything else. With methodology, with efficiency, with the unspoken belief that every variable could be managed if you understood it well enough. She heard the soft thud of a ceramic cup being placed on marble, then his footsteps, unhurried, crossing the open-plan living space. He set the cup beside her on the window ledge without speaking. Dark roast, single shot, the way she took it. He remembered every detail about her preferences. That had always been one of the things that confused her most about him. A man capable of that level of attention and care in private, and that level of erasure in public. "You didn't come to bed," he said. "I know." He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. He didn't touch her. He read her the way he read rooms, carefully, looking for threat vectors and weaknesses. "The press conference is at 2, he said. "The Daewoo deal closes this week. After that, I know," she said again. He paused. She felt him processing her tone, running it through whatever internal system he used to classify emotional weather. She kept her eyes on the river. "Nia, I'm fine, Ji-tae. Go get ready." Another pause, then he picked up his own coffee and walked back toward the bedroom. She listened to the sound of his shower running. She pressed her forehead lightly against the cold glass and let herself feel, for just a moment, exactly how tired she was. 14 months. That was how long she'd been in Seoul. 14 months since she'd accepted the consulting contract with Park Holdings, flown in from New York thinking it was a 6-week engagement, and somehow ended up in the orbit of Seo Ji-tae, first as a professional contact, then as something harder to categorize, then as his wife, in a small ceremony with 4 witnesses and no photographs, in a private room on the 47th floor of a building he owned that didn't appear on any public registry. She had understood, at the beginning, why discretion was necessary. She wasn't naive. She had grown up the daughter of a Nigerian-American professor and a woman who built her own accounting firm from a folding table in a South Side Chicago apartment, and she had learned early that the world had layers, that powerful people operated in spaces the public never saw, and that survival sometimes meant playing by rules that weren't posted anywhere. She had understood all of it. What she had not understood, what she had let herself not understand, which was a different and more dangerous thing, was that Ji-tae's world didn't have a threshold she could eventually cross. There was no timeline at the end of which she would be acknowledged. The discretion wasn't a temporary measure. It was architecture. It was the load-bearing wall of everything he'd built, and she was the thing inside the wall, sealed in, kept warm, kept hidden. The espresso had gone cold by the time she set it down. Momt. Seo Ji-tae had inherited the Black Viper Syndicate at 26 when his father died of a stroke 3 weeks after being released from a prison sentence that should have been 20 years but was reduced to 4 because of agreements Ji-tae himself had negotiated with 2 prosecutors and a sitting judge. He had been 22 at the time of those negotiations. He had done it without his father's knowledge, without anyone's approval, because he had already understood that the organization needed to evolve or it would be dismantled by competitors or by the state, and evolution required exactly the kind of leverage nobody else in the family was willing to acquire. By 30, he had tripled the organization's revenue by moving aggressively into legitimate business, construction, logistics, private security, media. By 33, he had political allies in 4 parties and a personal network that extended into every major institution in South Korea. By 34, when he met Nia Okafor in the lobby of the Park Holdings building on a Tuesday afternoon in February, he was the most powerful organized crime figure in the country and one of the most effective at making sure that fact was impossible to prove. He had not planned to marry her. He had not, in the years before her, planned to marry anyone. His mother had been managing that expectation, or rather, demanding, for a decade. Presenting daughters of allied families at dinners Jitai attended with the polite blankness of a man serving a prison sentence, nodding at the right moments, never committing, never engaging in a way that could be weaponized against him later. Nia had not been presented. She had simply been there, standing at the lobby reception desk in a charcoal-wrapped dress, arguing in fluent Korean with a concierge who was trying to tell her that her visitor badge had expired, her voice calm, but her eyes absolutely not calm, and when she switched to English it was to say crisply, "My badge expired because your scheduling system double-booked my appointment and I've been standing in this lobby for 37 minutes. That's your problem. Not mine. Fix it." The concierge had folded. Jitai had watched from across the lobby. He had thought, without intending to think it, there she is. He wasn't a man given to romantic sentiment. He'd spent so long constructing the interior architecture of a person who couldn't be reached that the construction had become the reality. But something in the way she'd stood there, not aggressive, not performative, just absolutely certain of her own right to be where she was, had destabilized something in him that had been calcified for years. He'd introduced himself. She'd looked at his business card and said, "I know who you are. I've done my research. And I'm not here to meet you, I'm here to meet Director Choi." He had smiled. It wasn't something he did often, and when he did, it was usually calculated. That one hadn't been. The offices of the Black Viper Syndicate's legitimate arm, registered as CO Strategic Holdings, occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Yeouido, the financial district. On the morning of the press conference, those floors were running at the particular tension level that preceded major public events. Phones ringing, aides moving with the urgent shuffle of people who couldn't afford to be wrong. Screens showing live feeds from the conference room downstairs where the media setup was being finalized. Jitai moved through it all like a ship cutting water. He was dressed in a charcoal brioni suit, his tie a shade of deep burgundy that his stylist had chosen to project authority without aggression. A distinction, apparently, that was visible on camera. He stopped twice to review documents. He spoke to his chief of staff, Park Hyun-soo, in a low, precise voice. Hyun-soo was 54, had been with the organization for 20 years, and had the permanent expression of a man processing 3 separate threats simultaneously. He was also the person who had, 6 months ago, presented Jitai with a formal memorandum recommending that the marriage not be disclosed until after the Daewoo acquisition closed. The reasoning was extensive. The strategic implications were real. Daewoo's founding family was conservative, politically connected, and had already expressed private concerns about Jitai's bachelor status. An unmarried man in his mid-30s heading a conglomerate raised questions about stability, legacy, succession. Introducing a foreign wife now, without preparation, without narrative management, would create friction at the worst possible moment. Jitai had read the memo. He had not responded to it in writing. He had simply begun implementing its recommendations. He had not discussed it with Nia. That was the fact he had been managing not to examine too closely for 6 months. He was good at not examining things. He had built a career on his ability to compartmentalize, to place volatile material in sealed containers inside himself, and function perfectly well around them. Nia was not in a sealed container. She was everywhere. In the coffee he made her, in the way the penthouse felt different on the mornings she left early, in the precise space her absence carved out when she wasn't in a room. But the decision about the memo was in a sealed container, and he had not opened it. Us. Nia had not planned to watch the press conference. She was at the apartment. She had work. Real work. Her own work. The kind she'd been doing quietly and methodically for the past 8 months, building something that had nothing to do with Jitai's world and everything to do with the version of herself that had existed before she'd walked into that lobby and said the words, "I know who you are." She had 3 client calls scheduled that afternoon. She had a report to finalize for a New York-based firm that was one of 4 she'd cultivated through a consultancy she'd registered under her own name in Delaware, using her own savings through channels Jitai knew nothing about. She had not been planning to sabotage anything. She had not been planning anything dramatic. She had been planning, very quietly, to be ready. Because somewhere in the previous 8 months, in the accumulated weight of charity galas she'd attended as a guest with no official status, in the business dinners where Jitai introduced her to men who would become senators and never used the word wife, in the quiet mornings and the passionate nights, and the strange suspended reality of loving someone whose public self had no record of you, somewhere in all of that, she had begun preparing a life that would function without him. She told herself it was just prudence. Women who survived dangerous worlds maintained exit options. It didn't mean anything. She told herself that right up until the moment she turned on the television. It was one of Jitai's aides who had sent the alert, a live link to the press conference stream sent to the household account she had access to, probably by mistake, probably meant for someone else. She'd opened it without thinking. The conference room was full. She recognized some of the faces, Dewa executives in the front rows, media in the back, the specific configuration of powerful people performing normalcy for cameras. Jitai was at the podium. The acquisition terms had apparently just been confirmed. There was the formal language of corporate success, the careful phrasing of men who'd spent weeks with lawyers reviewing every sentence. Then a reporter in the third row raised her hand. "Mr. Seo." The woman's voice was clear, a little sharp. "There have been persistent rumors over the past year about your personal life. Can you confirm whether you are currently married?" The room shifted. Not dramatically, just the specific quality of attention that surfaces when a question lands outside the approved script. Jitai's expression didn't change. He had an extraordinary face for this, composed in a way that was almost architecturally stable, revealing only what he chose to reveal. He smiled. "No," he said, "I'm not married." Nia sat very still on the couch in their penthouse, 43 floors above a city that had never officially known she existed, and watched her husband tell the world she didn't exist. She didn't cry. She didn't feel the hot surge of anger she might have expected. What she felt was something quieter and more final than either of those things. The particular sensation of a door closing in the deepest part of yourself, not slamming, just easing shut on a hinge so worn it barely made a sound. She turned off the television. She sat in the silence for a long time. Then she got up, went to her study, opened her laptop, and began making phone calls. The first call was to her attorney in New York, not the attorney she and Jitai had used for the marriage, a man named Kwan who worked exclusively for the CO organization and whose loyalty to Nia existed in direct proportion to his loyalty to Jitai, which was to say not at all. Her attorney. A woman named Dana Reeves, whom Nia had known since law school, whom she'd kept contact with through 14 months of careful management, to whom she'd sent, over the past 8 months, a series of documents for safekeeping under attorney-client privilege. "I need to activate the file," Nia said. Dana was quiet for 2 seconds. "The full package?" "Everything except the last section. Hold that." "Timeline?" 48 hours, maybe less." Another pause, then, "You're sure?" Nia looked out at the Seoul skyline, the Han River, the city that had contained her for over a year, that she had moved through in the margins of a powerful man's life, that had taught her things about herself she hadn't expected to learn. "I've been sure for months," she said. "I was just waiting to stop hoping I was wrong." Dana said she'd begin. They discussed logistics, dispassionately, precisely, the way 2 women who had both spent their careers in rooms full of men who underestimated them knew how to discuss things that mattered. When the call ended, Nia sat for a moment with her phone in her hand. Then she opened the drawer of her desk and removed a manila envelope she'd placed there 3 weeks earlier. Inside was a memory stick and a handwritten list of contact information. A reporter's name at the top, a direct line, the specific email address for encrypted correspondence. She'd been introduced to Jang Mi Rai at a gallery opening 8 months ago. one of the semi-public events that Jitai attended with Nia at his side but never by name, always positioned as a colleague or contact. Jiang Mirei was 41, had built a reputation over 15 years of investigative journalism that had helped bring down a defense ministry official and a major pharmaceutical company's CEO. She was not a person who could be bought. Nia had spent 20 minutes talking to her about the exhibition, then another 40 minutes over drinks about the state of corporate accountability in South Korea, and had left with a card and the specific understanding that Jiang Mirei was someone she might one day need. She would need her tomorrow, but not tonight. Tonight, there were things to do that required a different kind of attention. Jitai returned to the penthouse at 7:45. The acquisition signing had run long. There were dinners, the formal celebrations that followed successful deals of this scale, the elaborate ritual of powerful men performing prosperity for each other. He looked tired in the way he always looked tired after these events. Not physically, because he maintained his body with the same discipline he brought to everything else, but in the particular way that social performance tired him, the way spending hours inside a constructed version of yourself left the real version slightly depleted. Nia was in the kitchen. She'd made dinner, rice, a simple fish dish, the kind of meal she made when she wanted to do something with her hands, without it meaning anything complicated. She heard him set down his briefcase, heard him loosen his tie, the soft sound of silk moving through a collar. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You cooked," he said. "I was hungry." He came in, opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water. She could feel him watching her from across the kitchen. She kept her attention on the food. "Nia." The press conference was fine. It looked like it went well. She plated the fish without looking up. "The Daiwa thing is done?" A beat of silence. "Yes." "Good." She set the plates on the counter. "Come eat." He didn't move for a moment. She could feel the weight of what he wanted to say, the specific density of a man trying to determine whether a conversation was happening or being deferred, whether the calm in the room was genuine or a surface over something structural. He came to the counter, sat down across from her. They ate. The silence had the quality it sometimes had between them. Not uncomfortable, not easy, but layered, full of the things they were both doing with their mouths that weren't talking. At some point, she asked about one of the Daiwa executives she'd seen at a previous event. He answered. She asked a follow-up question. He told her something she hadn't known. The conversation moved slowly into the ordinary channels of an ordinary evening. Nia was an extraordinary actor. She had not always been. She had developed the skill inside this apartment, inside this marriage, inside the slow, patient work of learning how to be invisible without becoming nothing. After dinner, she told him she had work to finish and went to her study. She heard him watch television for an hour, then heard him come down the hall, pause outside the study door, then continue to the bedroom. She worked until 2 in the morning, not on client reports, on a document she'd been constructing for months, a timeline, annotated with records, the kind of evidence that told a story so clearly it didn't require interpretation. When she was finished, she sat back and looked at what she'd built. It was quiet in the apartment. Jitai would be asleep by now. She thought about going in, watching him sleep the way she sometimes did in the early months. This man who was so controlled when awake and so unguarded in sleep, his face releasing all the architecture he maintained during waking hours. She thought about it and decided against it. She had learned not to do things that made leaving harder. Bus. The next morning he made her coffee, set it on the window ledge without speaking, the way he always did. She held it with both hands, the river below. "I have meetings until 6, he said. "Okay." "We could have dinner. That restaurant you mentioned, the one near Insadong." She looked at him. He was already dressed, already composed, already the version of himself that moved through the world running calculations. He meant it, she could tell. The dinner was a genuine offer, a genuine gesture, whatever version of reaching toward her he was capable of from inside the architecture of who he'd built himself to be. She thought about saying yes. She understood very clearly that saying yes would make the next 48 hours more complicated. "Maybe," she said. "I have some things I need to handle first." He nodded, read something in her face that he couldn't quite classify, stayed in the kitchen doorway a moment longer than he needed to. "Nia." "Jitai. Are you—" He stopped, started again. Is something wrong? She looked at him for a long time, long enough that the pause itself was an answer, even if she didn't say anything yet that he could use. Go to your meetings, she said. We'll talk tonight. He left. She watched his car pull away from the building from the window. Then she picked up her phone and called Jang Mi-rai. The journalist arrived at the cafe in Mapogu at 11:15, 12 minutes after Nia, which meant she'd been nearby, which meant she'd been waiting. She was exactly as Nia remembered, small, with the kind of stillness that people mistake for passivity, until they've been in a room with her long enough to understand it's predatory. Jang Mi-rai sat down across from her, ordered an Americano without looking at the menu. I wasn't sure I'd hear from you, she said. I wasn't sure you would either. Nia set the manila envelope on the table between them. I want you to understand what this is before you open it. I'm not giving you something to hurt him. I'm giving you something that already happened. He made these choices. The documentation is real. None of it is contested. Jang Mi-rai looked at the envelope without touching it. What do you want from me? Publication. Timing is mine to specify. The story is straightforward. A marriage that was deliberately concealed, evidence that the concealment was systematic and organizational rather than personal, documentation of how it was done. The story isn't that he married a foreigner. The story is that he operated a campaign to erase a person from his public record while maintaining access to her in private. That's a story. Yes. And you're willing to have your name in this? Nia met her eyes. It's the whole point. The journalist was quiet. She looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Nia with the specific expression of someone recalibrating, updating an assessment. Open the envelope, Nia said. Jang Mi-rai opened it. She went through the documents slowly, the marriage certificate, the internal communications, the organizational memos. Nia watched her read. There was a particular expression that crossed her face when she reached the memo from Park Hyun-soo recommending active concealment. It wasn't surprise, it was confirmation. How long have you been building this? Jang Mi-rai asked. Long enough to know I wasn't wrong. And the timing, 48 hours, or less. Nia pulled the envelope back and removed the last document, a second memory stick. This is the digital archive. Everything is time-stamped and independently verifiable. My attorney in New York has a complete copy. Any attempt to suppress it gets complicated. Jang Mi-rai wrapped her hand around her coffee cup. She was thinking. Nia could see it. The journalist's particular processing mode. The story assembling itself in her head. There will be consequences for you, Jang Mi-rai said. I'm aware. He's not a man who accepts this kind of, I know who he is, Nia's voice was level. I've been married to him for 14 months. I know exactly what he's capable of. I also know what I'm capable of. I didn't build this file hoping he'd be reasonable. I built it so that any unreasonable response he has will become its own story. The journalist stared at her. You've been planning this a long time, she said. I've been preparing, Nia said. There's a difference. I spent months hoping I wouldn't need it. She stood, picked up her bag, left enough cash on the table to cover both their coffees. 48 hours, she said. I'll send you the signal. She walked out of the cafe into the cold Seoul morning and didn't look back. That evening, Ji-tae called at 6 to say the meetings had run late and dinner would need to wait. She said that was fine. She spent the evening in her study, confirmed arrangements with Dana in New York, reviewed the documents one final time. She did not pack that night. Packing meant commitment to a timeline, and she wasn't ready to be past the threshold yet. She told herself she was giving herself one more night inside the life she'd chosen before she began the process of leaving it. She sat in the dark of the living room for a long time, looking at the city, the Han River, the towers, the 10,000 lights of a place that had been her home without ever officially knowing her name. Ji-tae came home at 8:30. He found her in the dark and turned on a single lamp without comment, the way a person does when they've shared enough space with someone to know which silences need light and which don't. He sat beside her on the couch, not touching, just present. You said we'd talk, he said. I know. What did you need to handle today? She looked at him, his profile in the low light, the line of his jaw, the particular quality of attention he gave to things he considered important. He was giving her that attention now. Nothing that couldn't wait, she said. He was quiet. I watched the press conference yesterday, she said. His jaw tightened, just slightly, an almost imperceptible movement that she'd learned to read like punctuation. Naya? You don't need to explain it. Her voice was the calmest it had ever been with him. She had the strange sensation of standing outside herself, observing. I understood the reasoning, the Daewoo deal, the family pressure, Hyunsu's recommendations. I understand all of it. Then you understand that it was strategic. She said the word evenly, not as an accusation, just as a fact. Yes, I understand that it was strategic. He turned to look at her. In his face, she could see the specific mixture that she'd spent 14 months learning. The intelligence, the control, the banked intensity that was always there under the surface, and something else. Something he rarely let surface, that might have been the part of him that was capable of fear if he'd had any practice at it. It's over now, he said. The deal is closed. After this, I know, she said. You were going to tell me about after this. You've been telling me about after this for 8 months. He didn't respond. I believed you every time, she said. I want you to know that. I wasn't sitting here being cynical about your intentions. I genuinely believed that the after this was going to come. It will. Jitai. She said his name the way she did when she wanted him to stop talking and listen. The specific register she'd learned was the only one he couldn't talk over. You told 60 reporters and however many camera crews that you don't have a wife. And your wife was in the building. The silence after that was different from all the silences before it. She could feel the weight of it differently. The way it had texture now. Something rough in it. Something that couldn't be smoothed by the kind of explanation he was used to constructing. I know, he said, very quietly. I know you know, she said. That's not actually the problem. She stood up. He watched her, very still, the way he went still when he was trying to understand a situation he didn't have a playbook for. I'm tired, she said. I'm going to bed. She went to the bedroom. She did not hear him follow. Much later, 2 in the morning, 3, she felt the mattress shift as he came to bed. She stayed very still, breathing slowly, the way she'd taught herself to breathe in this apartment when she needed to be somewhere else inside her own head. His hand came to rest on her shoulder. Not demanding. Just placed there the way you place something valuable on a surface when you're not sure you'll be allowed to keep it. She didn't move. He lay there in the dark, his hand on her shoulder, both of them pretending to sleep. And somewhere in the walls of that penthouse, in the sealed containers of a man who had built his entire life around the premise that he could manage any consequence, something had begun. Sa. The hand was still there when morning came. Jitai's palm on her shoulder, heavy with the particular weight of a man who had fallen asleep, holding on to something he wasn't sure he had the right to hold. Nia had not slept. She'd lain there in the dark, counting the hours by the quality of light changing behind the blackout curtains. The blue-black of 3 a.m. bleeding into the gray of 5, then the first pale wash of soul morning pressing through the edges. She waited until his breathing had the deep, slow rhythm of genuine sleep. Then she eased herself out from under his hand. Carefully. The way you move when you are trying not to wake something that is better left sleeping. She dressed in the bathroom. Dark jeans, a cream blouse, the cognac leather boots she'd bought herself on her first month in Seoul, before she'd understood what kind of world she'd walked into. She did her makeup in the small circle of light above the mirror. Foundation, mascara, the neutral lip she defaulted to when she needed to look composed and mean it. She looked at herself for a long moment. She looked like a woman who had made a decision. She went to the kitchen. She did not make coffee. She stood at the counter and ate half a piece of toast dry, standing up, because she wasn't hungry, but understood that her body would need something before the day ahead. Then she picked up her bag, took the elevator down 43 floors, and walked out into Seoul. Park Hyun-soo arrived at CO Strategic Holdings at 7:15, as he always did. He liked the building before the rest of the staff arrived. The particular quality of control it gave him, moving through quiet corridors, knowing the shape of the day before anyone else inhabited it. 20 years with the organization had given him a calibrated instinct for threat. He read shifts in the atmosphere the way sailors read weather. He was reading one now. The chairman had not arrived yet. That was unusual. Jitai was almost always in the building before Hyun-soo. The fact that he wasn't meant the morning had begun wrong somewhere. Hyun-soo poured coffee, took it to his office, and sat with the controlled stillness of a man running scenarios. His phone rang at 7:42, the chairman's private line. "She knows about the memo," Jitai said. No greeting, no preamble. Hyun-soo set down his coffee cup. "How much does she know?" "I don't know. She didn't say it directly." "What did she say?" A pause. Hyun-soo could hear Jitai moving, the particular cadence of a man pacing a room, which was something the chairman almost never did. "She said she understood the reasoning. That's what she said. She named the deal, the family pressure, your recommendations." Hyun-soo was quiet for 3 seconds. "She named me specifically." "Yes." "Chairman, if she has the memo..." Jitai stopped. When he spoke again, his voice had flattened into the register he used when he was containing something volatile. "If she has it, and she's had it for any length of time, then she's had it long enough to have made copies, which means the question isn't about the memo anymore. The question is what she intends to do with it." Hyun-soo thought about what he knew of Nia Okafor. He had studied her the way he studied everything that entered the chairman's orbit, systematically, without feeling. She was 31, American, with a graduate degree from the University of Chicago and a professional history that suggested exceptional strategic intelligence. She did not make emotional decisions. In 14 months of observation, he had never once seen her behave in a way that could be predicted by assuming she was operating from feeling rather than calculation. That was the thing that concerned him most. "She hasn't left the country," he said. "I would have received an alert." "I know." "Then she's still in Seoul, still operating inside whatever she's planning, which means she hasn't executed yet. Or she's already executed and we don't know it." Hyun-soo picked his coffee back up, held it. "I'll make inquiries, quietly. If anything is moving in the media ecosystem, I'll know within a few hours." "Don't touch her," Jitai said. The tone shifted, not dramatically, but in the way that temperatures change in certain rooms when certain things are said. "I mean that. Whatever you're thinking about managing this situation, whatever options you're running through right now, she is not an option. You understand me." "Chairman, Hyun-soo." "Understood," he said. The line went dead. Hyun-soo sat with his phone in his hand. Outside his office window, Seoul was fully awake now, the sky a flat, overcast white. The kind of day with no weather to speak of, just pressure. He thought about the memo. He thought about the chairman's wife, a woman he'd spent 14 months treating as a variable to be managed, and who had apparently spent 14 months doing the same to him. He picked up his desk phone and began making calls. Nia met Dana Reeves on a video call at 9 a.m., Seoul time, from a coffee shop in Hongdae. She'd chosen because it wasn't anywhere she'd ever been with Jitai. Dana appeared on screen in her New York office, 52, sharp-featured, with the specific brand of tiredness that high-stakes attorneys wore like a second suit. "The file is ready," Dana said. "Everything is packaged and staged. On your word." "Not yet." "Okay." Dana looked at something off-screen. "I did want to flag. I had an inquiry this morning. A law firm I don't recognize with a Seoul address. They were asking about your Delaware registration." Nia's hand tightened slightly around her coffee cup. "How did they find the registration?" "It's public record. Took some looking, but it's findable if you know to look for it." Dana met her eyes through the screen. "They found it, which means someone told them to look." Hyun-soo. "I don't know who, but the inquiry was fishing. They didn't have specifics. They were trying to establish the scope of what's registered. I gave them nothing they didn't already have." "How long before they figure out the client list?" "Depends on how hard they push. The New York registrations are clean. Your clients are on your end, not mine. But if they start applying pressure to the corporations themselves..." "They won't," Nia said. "Not yet. They don't know what they're trying to suppress yet. They're still figuring out the shape of it." She thought for a moment. "Move the timeline up. I'll send the signal to Jangmi Rai today." Dana was quiet for a beat. "Today. Today. Nia." Dana's voice went careful the way it did when she was about to say something important. "Once this goes, there's no pulling it back." "I know." And you understand what his response? Dana. Nia set the coffee cup down. I've been inside his world for 14 months. I know exactly what he's capable of. I also know that the best protection I have is exactly what we've already built, the transparency. Once it's public, there's nothing to suppress. Any move he makes against me becomes its own evidence. Dana looked at her steadily. All right, she said. Send the signal. The signal went to Zhang Mirei at 9:47. A single text. 2 words. Go now. At 10:15, Nia's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but she knew what it was before she answered. Jitai's voice was very quiet. That was always the sign. The quieter he was, the more dangerous the temperature beneath it. Where are you? Out, she said. Getting some air. Come home. I'll be home later. Nia. The single syllable had weight she could feel through the phone. There are people asking questions about your company, about your clients. I need you to come home so we can... You found out about the company. Silence. How long? He asked. 8 months. Another silence. She could picture him on the other end, standing very still, recalibrating the entire architecture of the past 8 months against this new information, finding all the moments he'd missed, all the evidence he'd failed to read because he'd been so certain of his own ability to monitor his environment. 8 months, he said again. Not a question anymore, just the sound of a man measuring something. I built it myself, she said. My savings, my contacts, my registrations, nothing that touched your organization. Nothing that used your name or your network. It's completely clean. That's not what I'm asking. I know what you're asking. She kept her voice even. You're asking why I didn't tell you, and the answer is the same answer to every question you're going to want to ask me today, Jitai. I didn't tell you because I stopped trusting that the information would be safe with you. The silence that followed that was a different quality. She'd said true things to him before that landed wrong, or landed too hard, or that he'd found ways to reframe in the moment. This one had nowhere to go. Come home, he said. His voice had changed. The quietness was still there, but it had shifted from dangerous to something else, something she'd heard only a handful of times in 14 months, in the darkest hours of nights when he let himself be something other than what he'd constructed. Please. She closed her eyes for 1 second. I'll be home this afternoon, she said. Don't send anyone to find me. That would be a mistake. She ended the call before he could respond. Dasao. She did go home. She went home because she needed to, because there were things there she had to retrieve, and because she understood that the next conversation with Jitai needed to happen face to face. She was not afraid of him. She had examined that question carefully, over many months, and arrived at the honest answer. She was not afraid of what he would do to her. She was afraid, in a different and more private way, of what she might still feel when she looked at him. That had always been the more dangerous territory. He was in the penthouse when she arrived. Not in the living room, not at his desk. In the kitchen, standing at the counter with no coffee, no phone, just standing there with his jacket off and his tie loosened and his hands flat on the marble, looking at the surface like it contained some answer he'd been trying to extract. He looked up when she came in. She had not been prepared for what was on his face. She had prepared herself for the controlled version of him, the chairman, the man who managed every response. What she found instead was the thing beneath the chairman, the version of him that only came out in the middle of the night and in the very worst moments. He looked like someone had taken something from him that he hadn't realized he needed until it was gone. She set her bag down, didn't come further into the room. Sit down, she said. We're going to talk, and you're going to listen first. He pulled out a bar stool and sat. Hands on the counter, eyes on her. All of his attention in that specific way he gave it to things that mattered, the way that had undone her in the lobby of the Park Holdings building 3 years ago and still had a cost she wasn't ready to name. I found the memo 7 months ago, she said, Hyun-Soo's memo, about the concealment strategy. I was looking for something in your home office, a charger, something mundane, and it was in an unlocked drawer. I don't know if you left it there by accident or whether you'd stopped thinking of it as something to protect. Jitai's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. I read it, she said. I understood it. The reasoning was clean. I'll give Hyun-Soo that. From a pure strategy standpoint, it made sense. She paused. What it didn't account for was me, as a person. Not a variable, not a liability to be managed, but a person who signed a marriage certificate and moved her life across the world and spent 14 months standing next to you at events without being introduced as your wife. Naya, I'm still talking. He closed his mouth. I want you to understand that I'm not angry about the memo, she said. I was, at first, but what I actually felt, when I had time to sit with it, was something I didn't expect. She looked at him directly. I felt sad, because the memo means you knew. It wasn't that you failed to think about what this was doing to me. It's that someone wrote it down in very clear language, put it in your hands, and you implemented it without telling me, without asking me, without considering that I might have had something to say about my own erasure. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the city moved, indifferent. I should have told you, he said. Yes. I told myself I would, that I'd explain it once the deal was, after this, she said. I know. You've been telling me about after this for most of our marriage. His jaw tightened. He pressed his hands flat against the counter, a gesture she recognized, the physical equivalent of containing pressure. I know I have. I know that's... He stopped, started differently. I don't have an excuse. I have reasons. I know they're not the same thing. What are the reasons? He looked at her. Something crossed his face, the specific expression of a man being asked to examine something he's been storing in a sealed container for a long time. My mother, he said finally. I know about your mother. She would have made your life impossible. She has influence in circles that... I know what she has. I know what she would have done, Jite. Nia moved to the counter, stood on the other side of it from him, close enough to make it personal. I didn't marry you expecting easy. I married you knowing your world. What I didn't know, what you didn't tell me, was that your world's definition of protecting me was making me disappear. He was very still. The press conference, she said. Yesterday. No, I'm not married. She let it sit there between them. I want you to tell me what was going through your head when you said it. His eyes had gone somewhere private. She watched him come back from wherever that was. The reporter was off script, he said. It wasn't supposed to be asked. When it came, he stopped. You answered by reflex, she said. I answered the way I'd been operating for 14 months. Yes. Nia stepped back. You did, and that's the problem. It wasn't a mistake, Jitai. It was fluency. You're fluent in my absence. You've been practicing it for over a year, and you're very good at it. He stood up from the bar stool. He didn't move toward her. He was careful enough to read that moving toward her right now was wrong, but he stood because sitting had become impossible. What do you want me to do? He said. Tell me what to do. I'll hold a press conference tomorrow. I'll call every outlet. Don't. Nia, don't. Her voice was harder now, the first time it had been hard in this entire conversation. Don't make me a tactical response. Don't make this another thing you manage. That's not what I'm asking for. Then what? His voice cracked slightly on the question, just at the end of it, just at the edge, where the control frayed. What are you asking for? Because I'm standing here and I can see that something's happening and I don't know how to stop it and I need you to tell me what you need. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the nights he'd spent sitting beside her working in silence. The way he'd started keeping her brand of tea in the kitchen, even though he didn't drink it, the specific quality of the way he held her when the nights got bad, like she was something he was anchoring himself to rather than the other way around. She thought about Hyunsu's memo, the memo that began, in order to protect the acquisition and maintain alliance stability, it is recommended that the chairman's personal situation remain undisclosed through the close of the fiscal quarter. The personal situation. That's what she'd been. For 14 months. Someone else's language for what they were. I don't think I can tell you what I need right now, she said. I think I need to be away from here for a while. Away from this apartment. From Seoul, maybe. She kept her voice even. It cost her. I need time to think without thinking inside your world. His face went through something she didn't have a name for. For how long? I don't know. Nia, if you leave, if you leave Seoul right now, with everything that's happening, the media interest that comes after the acquisition. Jitai. She picked up her bag from the floor. I need you to hear me very carefully right now. I am telling you I need space. The correct response to that is not a strategic assessment of the timing. He caught himself. She saw it. The chairman receding, the husband trying to find his way to the surface. Okay, he said. His voice was barely a voice. Okay, where will you go? I don't know yet. She moved toward the hallway, stopped at the edge of the kitchen, turned back one more time. He was still standing at the counter, the loosened tie, the jacket gone, the hands at his sides for once instead of controlled and purposeful. He looked, she thought, like a man waiting to find out whether something was survivable. Jitai, she said. Yes. You should know that whatever happens over the next few days, whatever you hear, whatever comes out, I didn't do it to hurt you. He frowned, the specific frown of a man parsing language he didn't fully understand yet. What are you? Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Jang Mirai. Story is live. First wave just hit the wire. You should know it's moving fast. Nia put the phone in her bag. She looked at Jitai one last time across the kitchen. This man she'd loved in the particular way you love things that are complicated and real and cost you something. This man who had sealed her in the walls of his empire and called it protection. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it. Not for what she'd done, for what it was going to do to him. She walked down the hallway to the bedroom and began. She was pulling a suitcase from the closet when she heard him make the sound. It wasn't a word. It was something below language. A sharp exhale, almost controlled, the kind a man makes when something hits him in a place he didn't know was exposed. She heard it from the bedroom hallway, heard the silence that followed it, and knew without going back to the kitchen that he had picked up his phone. She kept packing. She moved with the focused efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this in her head enough times that her hands knew what to do without instruction. Clothes first. The specific ones. The items she'd brought from New York, the things that predated Seoul, that belonged to the version of herself that existed before Jitai. She left the dresses he'd bought her, left the jewelry, left the silk robe hanging on the back of the bathroom door that she'd worn so many mornings drinking coffee at that window. She heard his footsteps in the hallway. They stopped at the bedroom door. She didn't turn around. Nia? His voice had changed completely. The husband who'd been standing in the kitchen with his hands at his sides, gone. What was back was the chairman, but not the controlled version, the cracked version. The one that only surfaced when the architecture had been breached faster than the failsafes could respond. It's already on 3 outlets, he said. KBS, Yonhap, and a digital wire that's syndicating internationally. She folded a sweater, put it in the suitcase. My phone has been ringing for 11 minutes, he said. Hyun-soo is calling. The Daewha family's attorney is calling. My mother, he stopped. My mother called twice. I imagine she did. You went to Jangmi-rai. It wasn't a question. Yes. When? Yesterday morning, before you called me to come home. The silence that followed was pressurized. She could feel it from across the room. She put another item in the suitcase without looking at him. The documents, he said. The memo, the marriage certificate, the internal communications. How long have you had all of it? Long enough to verify everything independently. Nia. His voice broke on her name. Not emotionally, structurally, the way load-bearing things break when the weight exceeds their design. Look at me. She closed the suitcase lid, pressed the latches. Then she turned. He was standing in the doorway with his phone in his hand and his face doing something she had never seen it do before. The control was still there, but it was like watching scaffolding hold up a building that had already begun collapsing internally. The outer framework intact, while everything behind it shifted. I need you to understand what you've done, he said. I do understand it. The Daewha deal was closed 48 hours ago. 48 hours. The ink is barely... I know the timing. The founding family has a morality clause in the acquisition agreement. A literal morality clause, Nia. If they invoke it... He put one hand against the door frame, not aggressively, like he needed something solid. We're talking about $4 billion and 18 months of structured integration that could unravel inside a week. She looked at him steadily. Then You'll fix it. You fix everything. Not this. Not with this kind of exposure in this kind of time frame. He pushed off the door frame, moved into the room, not toward her, just into the space, like staying still had become impossible. Why didn't you come to me? Before this? If you had the documents, if you knew about the memo, why didn't you sit across from me and show me what you had and tell me what you needed? I could have. What? She kept her voice level, flat, the way you hold a blade. What would you have done, Jitai? In that conversation, the one where I come to you with the memo and say, I know what you decided about my existence. What happens next? Do you disclose the marriage? Cancel the Dewa deal? Tell Hyunsu the strategy is off? He didn't answer. You would have managed it, she said. You would have been very warm and very present, and you would have told me you understood, and then you would have managed it into the shape that worked best for your organization. You have managed every difficult thing between us into a shape that worked for your organization. That's what you do. I stopped being able to trust that process 7 months ago. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, declined it. It rang again immediately. I have to. He looked at the phone, at her, back at the phone. The specific fracture of a man whose two most critical systems were failing simultaneously. Go, she said. I'm not done. Jitai. She pulled the suitcase handle up. There's nothing left to say here. Go deal with your organization. That's what you're built for. He stared at her. Something passed across his face that was not anger, not strategy. Something rawer than either. Something that looked uncomfortably like grief. His phone rang a third time. He turned and walked back down the hallway. She heard him answer, his voice immediately shifting back into the register he used for crises, clipped and precise and fully operational. She stood alone in the bedroom they'd shared for 14 months. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked out. The story moved the way stories about powerful men always moved when the documentation was airtight, fast and then faster, the initial wave generating its own momentum as each outlet that picked it up gave the next outlet permission to run with it. By noon, it was on every major Korean news platform. By 1:15, it had been picked up by 3 international wire services. By 2, the BBC and the Financial Times had both filed preliminary pieces, leading with the corporate angle, the concealed marriage, the acquisition timing, the organizational memo recommending active suppression. Jang Mi-rai had written it cleanly. That was the thing Jitai's people would be trying to find, a flaw, an overreach, something they could use to contest the framing. There wasn't one. Jang Mi-rai had used Nia's documentation as scaffolding and built around it with the specific precision of someone who had spent 15 years making sure her work was bulletproof before it ran. Every claim sourced, every document reproduced with provenance established. The headline was simple. Hidden Marriage, Hidden Wife, How Korea's Most Powerful Crime Boss Erased a Woman from His Life. The subhead, Internal Communications Reveal Systematic Campaign to Suppress Marriage to American Consultant Nia Okafor, Time to Protect a $4 billion Acquisition. Nia read it in the back of a taxi heading toward a hotel in Mapogu she'd booked under her company name 3 weeks ago. She read it twice. She felt something reading it that she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something quieter. The particular sensation of being seen by a public record for the first time in 14 months. Of having her name attached, in print, to her own life. Nia Okafor. Right there, in the headline. She put the phone in her bag. Watched Seoul pass outside the taxi window. Her phone had been ringing since she'd left the penthouse. Most of the numbers she didn't recognize. Dana had texted, "Story is clean and moving. You're covered legally. Call when you're settled." 3 of her New York clients had sent messages, cautious, professionally phrased, the kind of messages people send when they want to express support, without committing to anything until they know which way the situation resolves. One number she recognized. She let it ring 4 times before answering. Mother. Baby. Her mother's voice came through the phone like something physical, warm and direct, and carrying the specific weight of a woman who had built a life from a folding table and did not have patience for situations that didn't need to exist. I've been watching the news. I know. I'm sorry you found out this way. Don't apologize for that. A pause. Are you safe? Yes? Are you sure? Yes, Mama. I'm sure. Another pause. Her mother processed things in silence the way some people process them in words, thoroughly, without shortcuts. Do you need me to come? Nia pressed her fingers against her eyes for just a moment. Not yet. Let this settle first. I'll call you tonight. Nia. Her mother's voice went to the register it used for the most important things. Not louder, just more grounded, the way bedrock was more grounded than soil. You did the right thing. I don't care how it feels right now. You did the right thing. Nia said she knew, said goodbye, put the phone in her lap and looked out the window for a long time without seeing anything. CO Strategic Holdings became a different building between noon and 2 p.m. The controlled chaos that Hyun-soo had spent 20 years managing had a specific texture, organized, directed, purposeful, even at its most intense. What moved through the building that afternoon was something else. It had the quality of a system responding to a threat it hadn't modeled, trying to apply protocols to a situation the protocols weren't designed for. Ji Tae was in the conference room on the 31st floor with Hyun-soo and 3 attorneys and the organization's media director, a woman named Son Yeon-ji, who had managed every public crisis they'd faced in the past 6 years. She was 45, efficient, with the practiced calm of someone who'd seen worse. She was not calm now. We have 3 options, she said, standing at the head of the table with the tablet in her hand and the posture of someone delivering a medical prognosis. We contest the documentation. We release a statement acknowledging the marriage and framing it as a private matter that was handled inappropriately by the media, or the chairman makes a direct public statement. The documentation can't be contested, Hyun-soo said flatly. He was seated to Ji-tae's left. He hadn't looked at Ji-tae directly since the chairman had arrived. I've reviewed what they published. The sourcing is complete, and the documents are authenticated. Any challenge we make gets torn apart in a news cycle and makes the story bigger. The private matter framing, Yeon-ji continued, buys us approximately 48 hours before someone points out that private matter doesn't account for an internal organizational memo recommending active concealment, at which point the story stops being about a marriage and starts being specifically about the memo, and we're worse off than we are now. Ji-tae had not spoken since he'd walked into the conference room. He was seated at the center of the table with his hands flat on the surface in front of him, looking at a point somewhere between the table and whatever internal landscape he was currently navigating. Around him, the attorneys argued. Yeon-ji continued presenting options. Hyun-soo fielded the calls from the Daewha family's representatives. The Daewha call came at 2:47. Hyun-soo put his phone face down on the table and looked at Ji-tae. The room went quiet. Director Han wants a call with you personally, Hyun-soo said. Within the hour. The morality clause, Ji-tae said. They haven't invoked it, but they're asking questions that suggest they've had their lawyers review it this morning. Ji-tae looked at the table surface for a long moment. Then he looked at Hyun-soo. Get me the call, he said. In here. Everyone else, out. The room cleared. Hyun-soo stayed, set up the secure line, placed the call. Then he too moved toward the door. Stay, Ji-tae said. Hyun-soo stopped, turned back. Sit down. Hyun-soo sat. The phone line connected. Director Han's voice came through. 71 years old, the patriarch of the Daewha founding family, with the measured delivery of a man who had spent 5 decades in rooms where words had legal weight. Director Han, Ji-tae said. Chairman CO. A pause that had been carefully constructed. I think you understand why I'm calling. I do. My lawyers have reviewed the morality clause. We have grounds to invoke. Ji-tae's expression did not change. His hands remained flat on the table. Yes, you do. A longer pause. You're not going to argue that point. No. That surprises me. I spent the last 4 hours having my team look for ways to argue it, Ji-tae said. There aren't any that work. The clause exists and your grounds for invoking it are solid. Arguing otherwise would waste your time and mine and probably make you less inclined to finish this conversation. Silence on the line. Then, something that might have been the older man reassessing. What I want to know, Director Han said, is whether you were aware of the concealment when you signed the acquisition agreement. Yes. And you believe that was an acceptable risk? I believed it was a manageable situation. I was wrong about that. Jitae's voice was steady. Nia had been right. He was built for crisis management, and it was operating now even in the middle of the wreckage he was standing in. I'm not going to present you with explanations, Director Han. I can tell you that my organization's conduct toward my wife was wrong. I can tell you the memo that authorized it was implemented without her knowledge or consent. And I can tell you that the person most harmed by everything that's come out today is her. Another silence. My wife is Nia Okafor, Jitae said. She is 31 years old and she is one of the most capable people I have encountered in my professional life. She spent 14 months in a situation that my organization created without her agreement. She responded to it with more integrity than I showed in creating it. Whatever decision you make about the acquisition clause, I want the record to be clear about that. The line was quiet for a long time. I'll be in contact with your attorneys, Director Han said finally. I haven't made a decision. The call ended. Hyun-soo and Jitae sat in the emptied conference room. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seoul skyline held its indifferent posture. The Han River, the flat white sky. Chairman? Hyun-soo began. The memo, Jitae said. Hyun-soo stopped. Your memo. Jitae turned to look at him directly for the first time. The one recommending the concealment strategy. You wrote it. I implemented it. That's the accurate accounting. Hyun-soo held his gaze. 20 years of working for this man had given him the ability to read the specific gradations of what Jitae was and wasn't saying. Yes, Hyun-soo said carefully. I want you to be clear about something. Jitae's voice was very quiet. Not dangerous quiet, something different. The quietness of a man who had set something down that he'd been carrying for too long. The decisions I made were mine. The memo gave me language for something I was already doing. He stopped. I'm not going to make you the explanation. Hyun-soo was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that. Don't. Jitae stood. It's not generosity, it's accuracy. He picked up his phone from the table. Find out where she is. Chairman, I advised you. I'm not going to send anyone to her. I need to know she's safe. He looked at his phone. The unanswered calls, the cascading notifications, the entire weight of what was coming. She built an exit strategy inside my house for 8 months and I didn't see it. I need to know she's safe. That's all. Hyun-soo nodded slowly. I'll make inquiries, quietly. Jitae walked to the conference room window, stood there looking at the river, the white sky, the city. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His mother. He stared at it for 3 full seconds. Then he answered. Mother. Her voice came through like a blade drawn cleanly from a sheath. No warmth, no preamble, no maternal softening. Madam Seo Kyung-ja was 70 years old and had spent those years in the specific ecosystem of Korean organized crime as the wife of one patriarch and the mother of another. And she had the particular species of cruelty that develops in women who have survived that ecosystem long enough to have learned all its tools. I assume, she said, that you understand the magnitude of what has happened today. Yes. The Dewa family called me personally, Jitae. Personally. Do you understand what that means? They went around you to come to me, which means they are questioning whether you are the appropriate person to be managing this organization. I spoke with Director Han 40 minutes ago, and he hasn't made a decision about the clause. Then he's still considering invoking it, her voice sharpened. Because of this woman, this foreigner you married in secret and have apparently been hiding for over a year, which I also was not told about, Jitae, which is a conversation we are going to have separately. Mother. Do not mother me in that tone. You have spent 14 months. I married her, he said. She is my wife. Whatever else is happening, I want that to be the part you understand first. Silence. The particular silence of a woman recalibrating an attack. She has humiliated this family, Madame Seo said, her voice dropping to a register that was almost gentle, which was its most dangerous configuration. She has taken private organizational documents and handed them to a journalist. She has exposed your personal life and your business practices in the same move, which is either very stupid or very calculated, and based on what you're telling me, I suspect it's the latter. It's calculated, Jitai said. She's the most strategically precise person I know. Then she is dangerous. She's not dangerous to you. She is dangerous to this family's mother. His voice went to the place it almost never went with her, past the deference, past the architecture of filial obligation that had governed his relationship with her since childhood. Flat and final. I need you to hear me. Nia did what she did because I gave her no other option. I made choices in this marriage that were wrong, and they were wrong before they were ever strategically problematic. I'm not going to have a conversation with you about her that doesn't start from that premise. The silence that followed was long enough to have texture. You sound like your father, his mother said finally. Her voice had changed, something older in it now and more specific. He used to protect people from me the same way, using that same tone. Did it work? A pause. Sometimes. Another pause. The Dehua situation needs to be resolved before the end of the week, or it becomes irrecoverable. Whatever you feel about your marriage right now, you understand that. Yes. And the woman, her name is Nia. And Nia, the name in his mother's mouth, had the quality of something handled with tongs. What do you intend to do? Jitai looked out at the river, the flat white sky that had no weather in it, just pressure. I'm going to fix what I broke, he said. The business situation or the marriage? Both. He pulled back from the window. But not in that order. He ended the call before she could respond. Bisham. Nia was in the hotel room in Mapugu at 4:15 when her phone rang, and the number on the screen was not Jitai, not Donna, not her mother. It was a number she recognized because she had memorized it months ago and then told herself she would never need it. Park Hyun-soo. She stared at it for 2 rings. Then she answered, Ms. Okafor. His voice was what it always was, measured, impeccably professional, carrying nothing that he hadn't decided to carry. I hope you'll allow me a few minutes. That depends on what you're calling to say. I'm calling to say that the chairman is asking about your safety, and I told him I would make inquiries. You're at the Mapo Grand, room 1214. A beat. I want you to know that's the extent of it. No one is coming. No one is being sent. He asked me to confirm you were safe. I'm doing that, and that's where my involvement ends. She was quiet. I also want to say something on my own behalf, Hyun-soo continued. His voice shifted slightly. Not much, but enough to register. The memo was my recommendation. The chairman implemented it, and those were his choices. But the recommendation was mine. He stopped. I want to acknowledge that what I recommended treated you as an obstacle rather than a person. That was wrong. I don't expect that acknowledgement to mean anything to you. I'm offering it because it's accurate. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, a different part of Seoul's skyline, lower buildings here, older neighborhood, the smell of the city different from Gangnam. It means something, she said. She was surprised to find that was true. Is there anything you need? Hyun-soo asked. No. The story is moving internationally. I want you to be aware. There may be journalists at the hotel by tomorrow morning. I can arrange. I'll handle that myself. Of course. A pause. Good night, Ms. Okafor. He ended the call. She put the phone face down on the nightstand, lay back on the hotel bed and looked at the ceiling. The room smelled like new carpet and recycled air. Outside she could hear the city, distant traffic, someone's television through the wall, the low urban hum that Seoul never fully dropped even in the quietest hours. She had been so precise in her planning. Every step, every document, the timing of the release, the specific outlet, the legal architecture Dana had built around the disclosure. She had modeled every response Jitai was likely to have, every organizational countermove, every way the story could be spun or contested or suppressed. What she hadn't modeled, what she was feeling now in this hotel room, staring at a ceiling in a city that had her name in its headlines for the first time, was this, that being right didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing in the rubble of something that had been real, and knowing that the rightness of what you'd done didn't make the rubble any less. She didn't sleep. Not the kind of not sleeping where you drift in and out and wake up disoriented, the kind where your body lies flat and your mind runs at full operational capacity for 8 straight hours, processing, cataloging, measuring the distance between where you are and where you intended to be. Nia lay on the hotel bed in Mapogu until the ceiling went from dark to gray to the particular pale yellow of early Seoul morning pressing through curtains that didn't quite meet, and then she got up because there was no point pretending anymore. She showered, made instant coffee from the basket on the credenza, stood at the window in the hotel robe and watched a street vendor 2 floors below setting up his cart in the blue cold of 6 a.m., moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this particular thing so many times that the body did it without the mind's full participation. She understood that feeling right now. She was running on the part of herself that didn't require hope to function. Her phone had 47 notifications. She worked through them methodically. Dana first, a detailed legal update, 3 paragraphs, ending with, "The story is now in 14 countries. Your legal position is clean. His organization's response has been statements only, no legal filings." That tells you something. Her mother, 2 texts. "Call me when you wake up," and then an hour later. "I'm proud of you." 3 more clients, these ones less cautious than yesterday, more direct. The kind of messages that said the wind had shifted and they'd read it correctly. Then, at the bottom, time-stamped at 2:41 a.m., Jitai. Not a call. A text. One of the very few he'd ever sent her. He was a phone call person, preferred voice. Believed texts were for information transfer, and calls were for everything else. The fact that it was a text told her something about the state he'd been in when he sent it. It said, "I know you're not sleeping either. I know you're not going to answer this. I just needed you to know that I told Director Han today that whatever happened with the deal, the record should show that you were the person wronged in this situation and you handled it with more integrity than I did. That's the truth. I'm sorry it took this long for me to say it out loud where it counted." She read it twice. Then she put the phone face down and finished her coffee standing at the window. The street vendor had his cart fully set up now. A woman stopped, bought something wrapped in paper, moved on. The city was waking up around a transaction so small it would leave no record anywhere, between 2 people who would never think about each other again. Nia thought, that's what ordinary feels like. She had been so far from ordinary for so long that the sight of it, 2 floors below, had the quality of something observed through glass. She got dressed. She had work to do. The call from Dana came at 8:15, and it didn't start the way calls from Dana usually started. "Something's happening," Dana said. No greeting. "I need you to listen carefully." Nia sat down on the edge of the bed. "Talk. I got a call this morning from a law firm in Seoul. Not the one from yesterday. A different firm, larger. The kind of firm that doesn't make inquiry calls. They make declarative calls." Dana's voice had the quality it used when she was controlling something that was trying to move faster than she wanted it to. "They're representing Madame Seo Kyung-ja." Nia's hand tightened around the phone. "She's filing a civil action," Dana said. "Defamation, disclosure of private organizational materials, and this is the part I need you to hear clearly. They're claiming that the documents you provided to Jang Mi-rai were obtained through a breach of fiduciary duty. The argument is that, as the chairman's spouse, you had an implied duty of confidentiality regarding organizational materials you encountered through the marital relationship." The room was very quiet. "That's a reach," Nia said. "It's a significant reach. It's also not impossible to argue in a Korean court, and the filing itself, regardless of whether it succeeds, creates a narrative. It reframes you as someone who stole from your husband's organization. It moves the story from Mafia boss erased his wife to wife betrayed her husband's organization. That's the point. Not to win. To muddy." Nia stood up, walked to the window. "This isn't Jitai. The firm is representing the mother, not the chairman. He doesn't know she's doing this." It wasn't a question. It was the product of 14 months of studying the specific friction points between Jitai and his mother, learning the places where her agenda diverged from his. "What's the timeline on the filing?" They said by end of business today. "Can we preempt?" "Say, I've been on the phone with a Seoul-based co-counsel for the past hour. She says we can file a counter-injunction arguing harassment and attempted suppression of protected disclosure. But it burns resources and time, and it puts you in a legal fight on Korean soil, which is a harder terrain for you than for them. Naya pressed her free hand flat against the cold window glass. Outside Seoul, the city that had contained her, the city that was now in a fight over who got to tell her story. What does your co-counsel say about our chances? 60-40 in our favor if it goes to hearing. Better if the international press coverage maintains its current framing. Korean courts are not immune to public pressure on a story this visible. But 60-40 means 40% of a scenario where you're in Korean litigation for months. Nia thought. She thought fast and she thought clean, the way she'd learned to think in rooms full of people who assumed she was decoration. File the counter-injunction, she said. Today, before they file. Get ahead of it. She turned from the window. And Dana, I need you to release the last section. Silence. The last section of the file, Nia said. The piece I held back, release it. Nia, that was your insurance. That was the piece you kept back specifically, so I know what it was for. Release it. If you release that, there's nothing left in reserve. Whatever comes after, there isn't going to be a whatever comes after if I'm sitting in Korean litigation for 6 months, while his mother's lawyers spent every day making me look like a criminal. Nia's voice was absolutely flat. Not cold. Flat, the way a very precise instrument reads when it's fully calibrated. The last section has the financial records, the ones that show how the concealment strategy connected to the acquisition structure. That makes this a financial fraud story, not just a personal one. Financial fraud stories have different gravity, different oversight, and they give me leverage in a jurisdiction that doesn't require me to be standing on Korean soil. Dana was quiet for 3 full seconds. You're using the filing as the trigger. She handed me the trigger. I'm using it. Another pause. All right, Dana said. I'll make the calls. But Naya, once that section goes, this becomes a different category of story. We're talking regulatory attention, possibly criminal referrals depending on how the acquisition financing was structured. I know. And Jitai, I know. Her voice didn't change. Do it. Quote, Jitai found out about his mother's filing at 9:03 from Hyun-soo, who delivered the information the way Hyun-soo delivered all catastrophic news. Seated, hands flat on the desk, voice at a register that communicated gravity without panic. Jitai stood at the window of his private office on the 33rd floor and listened. He let Hyun-soo finish. He didn't interrupt. Then he said, Get my mother on the phone. Chairman, the attorneys are all ready. Now, Hyun-soo. The call took 4 minutes to connect. His mother answered with the composed brightness of a woman who had done something she considered correct and was prepared to explain it at length. Jitai didn't give her the length. Withdraw it, he said. Jitai, withdraw the filing, today, in the next 2 hours. I am protecting this family's. You are escalating a situation that was containable into one that won't be. His voice had no heat in it. That was the thing about Jitai at his most serious. He didn't get louder. He got more precise, the way a surgical instrument was precise, removing everything unnecessary. Nia built her disclosure to be legally clean. I've had 4 attorneys review it in the past 18 hours. There is no successful action against what she released. What your filing does is give her grounds to release the section she held back. A pause. What section? The financial records, the acquisition financing, the part of the documentation she kept in reserve. He turned from the window. She's been playing this the way I would have played it. She kept collateral. Your filing is the trigger she was waiting for someone to hand her. The silence on his mother's end had a different quality now. Withdraw it, he said again. Or by end of business today, this goes from a story about a marriage to a story about financial fraud. And that is a story that has regulatory consequences I cannot manage through personal relationships and organizational pressure. That is a story that goes to institutions. He could hear his mother breathing. He knew that breathing, the specific rhythm of Seo Kyung-ja recalculating, running the same kind of scenarios he ran, arriving at the same conclusion from a different direction. She's more dangerous than I thought, his mother said, very quietly. Yes. Something moved through his voice on that single syllable, not pride, but the cousin of it. The thing you felt when you saw something done excellently, even when it was aimed at you. She is. Another silence. I'll speak to the attorneys, his mother said. 2 hours. He ended the call. He stood in his office for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket from the back of his chair, put it on, and walked out to Hyun-soo's desk. I'm going to her, he said. Hyun-soo looked up. Chairman, I'm not sending anyone. I'm not calling. I'm going. He was already moving. Handle whatever comes in the next 2 hours. The Daewha call, the attorneys, the media. Handle it. And if Director Han invokes the clause while you're, then he invokes it. Jitai said it without stopping. Handle it. He went to the elevator, went down 33 floors, walked through the lobby past his security detail, 2 men who moved immediately to flank him. He stopped, turned to the closer one. Not today. The man blinked. Chairman, protocol requires I know what protocol requires. I'm telling you, not today. He looked at them both. Go back upstairs. He walked out of the building alone. For the first time in 6 years, Seo Jitai moved through Seoul without protection. He knew the hotel because Hyun-soo had told him last night. He knew the room number. He did not call ahead because calling ahead gave her the option to not be there, and he needed her to be there. And he understood clearly that leveraging the element of surprise on the woman he'd spent 14 months failing was not a good look. But he was past the point of managing his look. He was past the point of managing anything. He took a taxi because his car had a driver who would have told Hyun-soo, and Hyun-soo would have called ahead despite being told not to, because Hyun-soo was constitutionally incapable of not managing situations. The taxi smelled like pine air freshener and old vinyl. The driver recognized him. Jitai saw it in the rearview mirror, the double take, the careful decision not to say anything. He stared out the window the whole ride. The hotel lobby was ordinary. Mid-range business hotel, the kind that catered to professionals and visiting academics and people who needed a clean room in a good neighborhood without the visibility of the luxury properties. She had chosen it because it was invisible. Of course she had. He rode the elevator to the 12th floor, walked down the corridor, stopped in front of room 1214. He stood there. His heart was doing something it had not done since he was 22 years old in a prosecutor's office, trying to negotiate his father's sentence without showing fear. It was loud. It was unreasonable. It did not care about strategy or positioning or the 17 different scenarios he'd run in the taxi about how this conversation might go. He knocked. Nothing for 4 seconds. Then he heard movement. Then the particular sequence of sounds that meant someone was checking the peephole. Then nothing again. 10 seconds of nothing. He put his hand flat against the door. Not knocking, just placed there, the way he'd placed his hand on her shoulder in the dark. Nia, he said. Not loud, just through the door, into the wood. I know you can hear me. I know you're deciding whether to open this. I'm not here to manage anything. I'm not here with a strategy. I came alone, no security, no staff. No one knows I'm here except Hyun-soo, and I told him not to do anything with that information. He paused. I just need 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, if you want me to leave, I'll leave and I won't contact you again unless you initiate it. I promise you that. Silence. He pressed his forehead lightly against the door. The wood was cool. He was sweating slightly despite the air conditioning in the corridor. Not the managed perspiration of a man under professional pressure, the real kind. The kind that came from standing outside a door, not knowing whether the person on the other side was going to open it. The lock clicked. The door opened 3 inches and stopped. The security chain. Nia's face in the gap. She looked like she hadn't slept. She looked like she'd been working for the past 3 hours, which she had, her laptop visible on the desk behind her, papers spread out, the instant coffee cup with its ring on the credenza. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked at her. 10 minutes, she said. She closed the door, took the chain off, opened it. He walked in. She went back to the desk chair and sat. Not on the bed, not anywhere that suggested anything softening. The chair, the professional posture. She was in dark slacks and a gray blouse, and her hair was pulled back, and she looked, he thought, exactly like the woman he'd first seen in the Park Holdings lobby arguing with a concierge, certain of her right to be where she was. He stood in the middle of the room, didn't sit, didn't move to close the distance. Your mother filed a civil action against me this morning, she said. I know. I've told her to withdraw it. Dana is filing a counter-injunction regardless. I know that too. He looked at her directly. I'm not here about the legal situation. I'm here because... He stopped. Started differently. I'm here because I've spent the past 20 hours realizing that I've been running the wrong calculation for 14 months. What calculation is that? That you would stay. He said it plainly. Every decision I made, the concealment, the timeline, the memo, underneath all the strategic reasoning, the actual premise I was operating from was that you would stay. That you were stable in a way that didn't require me to act. That the love was load-bearing enough that I could keep putting other things on top of it without checking whether the structure was holding. She was watching him. Her face had the quality it sometimes had when she was processing something she hadn't predicted. I was wrong, he said. Not strategically wrong, fundamentally wrong about what love is and what it requires. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, set it on the desk between them. Her wedding ring. The one she'd left in the penthouse. I found it on the kitchen counter. She looked at it, didn't touch it. I'm not here to give it back to you, he said. I'm not here to propose anything or promise anything or tell you the things I should have said before it got here. I know the timing on any of that is. I know it's past the point where it means what it would have meant 6 months ago. He looked at the ring on the desk, then at her. I'm here because you deserve to have someone show up, in person. With no intermediaries and no strategy and no managed version of themselves. He spread his hand slightly. The most open gesture she'd ever seen from him. This is what I have. This is all of it. I know it's not enough. I know that being enough now doesn't undo not being enough before, but I needed you to see it at least once. The room was very quiet. Outside, Seoul moved through its ordinary morning. The street vendor, the taxis. The 10,000 people performing their 10,000 ordinary transactions that left no record anywhere. Nia sat in the desk chair with her hands in her lap and looked at the man standing in the middle of her hotel room, the most powerful crime boss in South Korea, the man who ran an empire of political influence and corporate leverage and carefully managed consequence, standing in a mid-range hotel in Mapogu with no security and no plan, and his heart visible on his face for possibly the first time in his adult life. She had modeled so many versions of this conversation. She had not modeled this one. Sit down, she said. He sat on the edge of the bed. She turned the desk chair to face him. They were 6 feet apart. The ring was on the desk between them, catching the gray morning light from the window. She said, I need to tell you something that isn't in any of the documents. He waited. I didn't build the exit strategy because I stopped loving you. Her voice was steady, and she held his gaze the whole time she said it. I built it because I was terrified of how much I did, because I could feel myself making smaller and smaller and smaller to fit inside the space your world allowed for me. And I knew that if I didn't build something parallel, something that was entirely mine, I was going to disappear. Not because you made me disappear, because I would have let you. Because I loved you enough to let you, and that scared me more than anything your organization could have done to me. Jitai's face had gone through something while she spoke. She watched it happen. The layers coming down, not strategically, not managed, just dropping the way things dropped when they were too heavy to hold. Nia, I'm not finished. She leaned forward slightly. I need you to understand that what I did, the journalist, the documents, going public, that wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was the only way I could find to make myself real again. To put my name in the record, to exist in a document that your organization didn't control. She paused. Do you understand that? Yes, he said. And she could tell he did. Could tell it the same way she'd always been able to tell the difference between the chairman performing understanding and the man actually having it. Good, she straightened. Because what happens next depends on whether you actually understand it or whether you're going to spend the next 6 months processing it into a version you can manage. He looked at her. Something in his expression that she had no previous reference for, an openness that was almost painful to look at in a face that had been so long constructed against it. What happens next, he said, is up to you. I've spent 14 months making that decision for both of us. I'm done doing that. The The ring sat on the desk between them in the gray soul morning light. Neither of them reached for it. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She looked at it. Dana. She looked back at him. I have to take this, she said. I know. She picked up the phone. Dana. Dana's voice was tight. The mother withdrew the filing 40 minutes ago, and Nia, a pause. Jitai is at your hotel. I know. A beat of silence. Are you okay? She looked at Jitai sitting on the edge of the hotel bed. This man who had run through an entire morning alone and unprotected, to stand in a room she hadn't invited him to and say the truest things she'd ever heard him say. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I'll call you back. She put the phone down. The room held them both. The ring between them, the gray light. The city outside doing what cities did, moving, indifferent, continuous, carrying in its ordinary motion every kind of human wreckage and every kind of human. The city outside kept moving. That was the thing about Seoul. It had no opinion about what happened inside its rooms. It simply continued, indifferent and enormous, the way cities did, the way time did, without adjusting its pace for the specific weight of two people sitting 6 feet apart in a mid-range hotel in Mapogu, with a wedding ring on the desk between them and everything that had ever mattered to either of them suspended in the gray morning air. Nia put her phone face down on the desk. Jitai hadn't moved from the edge of the bed. He was sitting the way she'd seen him sit only a few times before, not the chairman's posture, upright and contained and purposeful, but something lower, something that conceded to gravity, elbows on knees and hands loosely linked, like a man who had set down a very heavy thing and hadn't yet decided whether to pick it up again. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer it without thinking about how the answer lands. Just the truth. He looked up. Okay. If the Dewa deal hadn't been happening, if Hyun-soo had never written the memo, if none of the business pressure had existed, would you have told the world about me? He didn't answer immediately. She watched him sit with the question, watched the reflexive movement toward a reassuring answer, and then the deliberate choice not to take it. I don't know, he said. She nodded once, slowly. I want to say yes, he said. I've been telling myself yes for months, but sitting here with everything that's happened, with who I know myself to be, I don't know. My mother's influence is real. The organizational dynamics are real. I'd like to believe I would have gotten there. He looked at his hands. I don't know if that's true. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I know. I'm aware of what that says about the previous 14 months. She stood up, went to the window. The street below, different vendors now, mid-morning commerce replacing the early dawn setup, the city cycling through its layers. She pressed 2 fingers against the glass. I meant what I said earlier, she said, about why I built the exit strategy, about being afraid of my own capacity to disappear inside your world. She paused. I need you to understand that the woman who leaked those documents, the woman who called Jong Mirai and built the file and set the timeline, that woman was trying to survive. She wasn't trying to destroy you. She was trying to make sure there was still a her left when it was over. I know. Do you? She turned from the window. Because the version of this story that your organization's media people are probably constructing right now is a version where I was running a calculated operation from the beginning, where I used the marriage to get access and then burned it when it suited me. That's not the version I'm telling. It doesn't matter what version you're telling. It matters what gets repeated. She came back to the desk. Didn't sit, stood over it, over the ring, looking at him from above. I spent 14 months being the version of me that your world needed me to be. Invisible. Unrecorded. I'm not willing to spend the next 14 months being the version of me that your world's narrative needs me to be now. The villain, the foreign woman who betrayed her husband. Jitai stood up. He was taller than her, and the room was small, and when he stood, they were closer than they'd been since she'd left the penthouse. She didn't step back. Neither did he. I will spend whatever time and resources it takes, he said, to make sure the accurate version is the one that exists in the public record. Not because it's strategically useful, because it's what's owed to you. Jitai, let me finish. His voice had a quality she'd heard only a handful of times. Not the chairman's precision, not the controlled register of a man managing outcomes, something rawer, the voice of someone who had been practicing honesty for the last several hours and was getting better at it in real time. I know you're leaving. I can see it. I can see it in the way you've already organized this room, the way you're standing, the way you answered Dana's call. You've already decided, and He stopped. I'm not going to ask you to change that decision. I don't have the right to ask you that. She looked at him. But I need to say something, he said, that isn't a negotiation and isn't a strategy and isn't me trying to change the outcome. I need to say it because it's true and because you've spent 14 months inside a version of me that I'm not proud of. And I want you to have heard this at least once. He looked at her with the specific directness of a man who had nothing left to protect. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. Not because of what you built or what you did in the last 48 hours, because of the quality of attention you bring to everything, because you saw me, not the chairman, not the organization, me, and you stayed anyway, until staying became impossible. That was a gift I didn't know how to receive. I'm going to spend a long time understanding why. The room was completely still. Nia's chest did something she hadn't given it permission to do, a tightening, the specific physical sensation of grief arriving through the gate that love had left open. She breathed through it. Her eyes stayed dry. She had spent too much of herself being composed in impossible situations to lose it now, at the end, in a hotel room with morning light going flat against the window. I know, she said quietly. I know you mean that. But meaning it now doesn't change what choosing looked like before now. He closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, they were the eyes of a man who had been hoping for a different answer and had known, at some level, that it wasn't coming. No, he said, it doesn't. She reached out. For a moment he thought she was reaching for the ring. She wasn't. She put her hand flat against his chest, over his heart, the way she'd done in the early months, in the dark, when neither of them was performing anything. She felt his heart beating under her palm, fast, unmanaged, real. You're going to be okay, she said. Your organization is going to survive this. You're going to handle the Dewa situation, and you're going to manage your mother, and eventually the story is going to be yesterday's news, and you're going to keep building the empire you've spent your whole life building. She looked up at him. And I need you to know. I need you to actually know, not just hear, that I'm glad I knew you. I am glad this was real. It was real. His hand came up and covered hers against his chest. It was real, he said. They stood like that for a moment that had no strategic value and no narrative function and no outcome attached to it. Just two people in a hotel room in Seoul, standing in the wreckage of something that had been genuine, acknowledging it before the morning finished closing over it. Then she took her hand back. You should go, she said. You have a company that needs its chairman right now. He looked at the ring on the desk. Take it, she said. Nia, it's yours. It came from you. She picked up her phone, turned back to the laptop. I'll be in touch through Dana about the legal situation. I'm going to need assurances that the organizational narrative doesn't go the direction I described. You have them. In writing, through attorneys. A pause, then, in writing, through attorneys. Good. She sat down, looked at the screen, then, without looking up, Ji-Tai. He stopped at the door. Tell your mother, she said, that I'm not her enemy. I never was. I just refuse to be invisible. She heard him exhale. A long, unsteady breath that he would never have allowed himself in any other room with any other person. I'll tell her, he said. The door opened. The door closed. She sat very still for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. Tab. She was on a flight to New York 31 hours later. The 31 hours in between were not nothing. They were the specific texture of an ending that refused to be clean because endings never were. There were calls with Dana about the legal framework they were building around the organizational narrative. There was a formal statement she approved through Jong Mi-rai that put her own words into the public record for the first time. Not a victim statement, not a declaration of grievance, just a clear, first-person account of what had happened and what she had done about it and why. Jong Mi-rai ran it verbatim. It took 40 minutes to go internationally viral. There were 2 calls with clients who had been watching the story develop and now wanted to accelerate conversations about formal engagement. There was a call with the man who had been managing her New York office space, a small suite in Midtown she'd signed the lease on 4 months ago that she'd told Jitai was for a client visit, in which she confirmed she would be taking full occupancy in 10 days. There was one moment, at 11:30 on the first night, sitting alone in the hotel room after the calls were done, when she let herself feel the full weight of it. Not strategically, not with any purpose attached. Just felt it, the grief of it, the genuine loss, the specific ache of loving someone in the particular way she'd loved Jitai, which was the way you love things that were complicated and costly and real. She sat with it for 40 minutes. She cried, not dramatically, not in the way that movies showed it, but the tired, unspectacular way that actual grief arrived, eyes burning and chest heavy and no catharsis attached, just the body processing what the mind had already accepted. Then she washed her face, went back to work. That was the part of herself she trusted most, not the strategy, not the precision, but the capacity to feel the real thing and then keep going. She had inherited it from her mother. She intended to use it for the rest of her life. At Seoul International Airport, in the business class lounge, 40 minutes before boarding, she sat with a real coffee. Not instant, the first good one she'd had in 2 days, and opened her laptop to clear her inbox before the flight. The second-to-last email in the queue was from an address she didn't recognize. She was about to skip it when the subject line stopped her. Miss Okafor, from Seo Kyungja. She put down the coffee. She opened it. It was 3 sentences, no salutation, no signature beyond the name. I have been told you said you were never my enemy. I spent this morning reading everything that has been written about you in the last 2 days. I believe you. That was all. Nia read it twice. She thought about what it had cost a woman like Seo Kyung-ja to write 3 sentences that conceded anything. She thought about the architecture of pride that a person built over 70 years inside the world Kyung-ja had inhabited, and what it took to put a crack in it voluntarily. She thought about writing back. Then she closed the email, not as a rejection, as a recognition that some things didn't need answering. Some things just needed to be acknowledged by being read. She closed the laptop, finished her coffee, looked out at the tarmac, the planes moving in their slow, enormous ballet of departure and arrival, the whole machinery of human transit operating below a flat gray sky. Her phone rang. She looked at it. Unknown number, Korean area code. For one suspended moment, her heart moved in a direction she recognized and then brought back with the particular effort of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and why. She let it ring. It stopped. No voicemail. She put the phone in her bag and picked up her boarding pass. The New York office was smaller than she'd imagined it when she was signing the lease in a browser window at 2 in the morning in the Gangnam penthouse. It was also better, the actual light different from what any photograph conveyed, a particular quality of afternoon Manhattan sun that came through the east-facing windows and made the whole space feel like something that was already inhabited by the best version of what it could become. She spent the first week arranging it exactly as she wanted. No assistant yet. She would get one, but not yet. Right now she wanted the specific experience of building the physical shape of the thing herself, moving furniture, hanging the 2 pieces of art she'd shipped from storage, setting up the desk in the position that caught the afternoon light best. Her first official client meeting was on a Thursday, 3 weeks after she landed, a financial services firm out of Chicago that had found her through a referral from one of the contacts she'd cultivated during the Seoul years. A woman she'd met at a corporate dinner where Nia had been invisible, and the woman had seen her anyway, had pressed a card into her hand and said quietly, "You're the smartest person in this room. Call me when you're ready to work." She'd been ready for longer than anyone knew. She was ready now. The meeting went 2 hours. At the end of it, the firm's managing director shook her hand and said, "We'd like to formalize this relationship as soon as you're available to discuss terms." Nia said she was available immediately, walking back to the office from the meeting, 12 blocks, because she needed the air, needed the specific New York experience of moving through a crowd in a city that had no idea who she was and gave her the full gift of its indifference. She stopped at a corner waiting for the light and thought, without intending to think it, "This is what I built. Inside his walls, in the margins of his empire, I built this." The light changed. She walked. The Daewoo acquisition survived. Jitae negotiated a modification to the morality clause that acknowledged the concealment issue, required a formal public disclosure of the marriage, and established a settlement framework that cost the organization significantly but kept the integration intact. It was the most expensive 6 weeks of negotiation in the organization's history. Hyun-soo managed most of it. Jitae led him. He was occupied with other things. He made the public disclosure in a press conference on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the hotel in Mapogu. He stood at the podium in the same conference room where the Dehwa deal had been announced, with the same configuration of cameras and reporters, and he said, "I am married to Nia Okafor. We have been married for over a year. The concealment of that marriage was a decision made by this organization under my direction, and it was wrong. Not strategically wrong. Wrong as an accounting of how a person should be treated." He paused. "My wife is one of the most capable people I have ever known. The public record should reflect that she exists." The clip went everywhere. Nia watched it on her laptop in the New York office at 9:15 p.m. after the building had emptied and the city outside was doing its nighttime thing through the east-facing windows. She watched it once. She sat with the feeling it produced for a moment. Something complicated, not simple enough to be called any single thing. Not vindication, not grief. Something that had both in it and something else too. Something that felt like the particular weight of a chapter that had been closed properly, with all the right words on the last page. She closed the laptop. She did not call him. He did not call her. That was the agreement they'd made in the hotel room, the unspoken one that existed underneath all the spoken ones. That acknowledgement was not restoration, that saying the true thing out loud was the thing owed, and that what came after was each of them, separately, learning to carry what they'd been to each other as something that had been real without being something that could continue. 8 months after she left Seoul, she was in the Chicago office of her first major client when her phone showed a news alert. She read it standing in a hallway outside a conference room, waiting for a meeting to begin. Black Viper Syndicate Chairman Seo Ji-tae announces organizational restructuring, confirms move toward full corporate legitimacy in 5-year transition plan. She read the article. It was detailed, the specific kind of detailed that suggested it had been written with full organizational cooperation, not leaked or investigated. Ji-tae was quoted at length. The quotes were careful and honest in the particular way she recognized, the way he talked when he'd decided that the accurate version was worth more than the managed version. One paragraph near the end. When asked what prompted the restructuring decision, Chairman Seo was quiet for a moment before answering. "I had someone in my life who operated with complete integrity inside circumstances that didn't require it of her. I found that I didn't want to be less than what she'd expected me to be capable of." Nia read that paragraph twice. Then she put the phone in her pocket and went into the meeting. She did not think about it again that day. Not because it didn't matter, because it mattered in the way that the most real things mattered, which was quietly and privately and without needing to be examined in order to be true. 2 years after Seoul, Nia Okafor and Associates occupied a full floor in Midtown Manhattan with 11 employees and a client list that had taken her from Chicago to London to Singapore in the span of 18 months. She had been profiled in 3 industry publications. The profiles all mentioned Seoul. She had stopped trying to control that, had learned that the Seoul story, told in her own words and through her own frame, was not a wound but a credential. It was the story of a woman who had built an empire inside someone else's empire and walked out carrying it with her. She was at her desk on a Friday afternoon in October when her assistant knocked. "There's a delivery," he said. "No sender name, Seoul postmark." She looked up. He brought it in. A flat package, carefully wrapped. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph, the only photograph that existed of their wedding. 4 witnesses, a private room, no cameras allowed. She had thought there were no photographs. She had been wrong. Someone had taken one. She didn't know who, had never known, and it had made its way here. In the photograph, Ji-tae was looking at the officiant. She was looking at him. She was smiling, the smile she'd stopped being surprised by in those early months, the one that arrived without her permission when she was watching him be something other than the chairman. In the photograph, his hand was in hers, and his profile was unguarded in the way it only ever was when he forgot to manage it. There was no note. She held the photograph for a long time, long enough that the October light moved through the office and changed the quality of the room around her. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk, the one that held the things that mattered too much to be organized and not enough to be displayed, and she placed the photograph inside it. She closed the drawer. She turned back to her desk, to the work, to the life she had built from the ground up in the margins of someone else's empire, out of the accumulated intelligence of a woman who had understood that surviving was not enough and had decided that building was the only alternative. Outside, New York did what New York did, enormous and indifferent and full of the 10,000 ordinary transactions that left no record anywhere, full of people carrying their private wreckages through public spaces with the specific dignity of those who had chosen to keep moving. Nia Okafor kept moving. She had always been very good at that. And in the bottom drawer of a desk on the 22nd floor of a midtown Manhattan building, in a photograph that had survived the wreck of a secret marriage and crossed an ocean without a note, a man's unguarded profile held the record of one moment when the most powerful crime boss in South Korea had forgotten to be the chairman and had simply been the man who was marrying the woman he loved. Neither of them talked about it again. They didn't need to. Some things didn't require words to remain true. Some things just needed to have happened, to have been real, to have cost something, and then to be carried forward quietly by the people who had lived them, as the specific kind of knowledge that only comes from having loved something genuine and lost it with your integrity intact. Nia turned off her desk lamp at 7:15, took her coat from the rack by the door, rode the elevator down 22 floors, walked out into the October evening. The city received her the way it always had, without ceremony, without record, without the slightest adjustment to its enormous, indifferent, continuous motion. She walked into it anyway. She had always known how to do that.